don't buy a Grand Seiko. Don't do it. Don't pull the trigger. When you inevitably flip that watch because you just won't be satisfied with it, you are going to lose hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on that watch. I'm just looking out for you. Don't buy that Grand Seiko. That is a sentiment that I've heard quite a few times within the watch enthusiast community over the years of being in this community and presenting watches on YouTube and being a lover of Seiko and Grand Seiko personally. And you know what? It's kind of a silly sentiment. And I know a lot of you that watch me, you do not care about resale value. You do not care about appreciation or value retention. You're in this hobby because you know what? You just love watches, plain and simple, and you're not in it to really make money. I mean, of course, it's nice when whatever watch that you are looking into, or maybe you've just recently purchased, it's always nice when it holds value or maybe appreciates a little bit. Sure, I'll give you that. These watches that we buy, these luxury, silly pieces of men's jewelry that tell us the time, it's always nicer when there's a little bit of added value to it, whether it's intrinsic or not. But that aside, let's go back to the value aspect and that silly statement that I said at the beginning of the video. Don't buy Grand Seiko. You're just going to lose money. Now, I will tell you guys, I have lost money flipping Grand Seiko. You know what? I'm a flipper. I recognize that. I enjoy cycling through watches. My father lost money on a Grand Seiko. Generally, when you buy Grand Seiko, if you do plan on letting go of it in the future, if it's not going to be a long-term keeper for you, generally you're going to lose some money. But that is the same could be said with many watches, and some brands more so than others. And so let's take a look at this one that's in front of the camera. This is the SBGH267 from 2018. This is a 1,500 unit limited edition that celebrates a couple different anniversaries. First, it is the 20-year anniversary of the 9S mechanical movement. It's also the 50th anniversary from the date that Grand Seiko first unveiled a true high beat movement. And a high beat is a 5 hertz beat frequency where the seconds hand moves 36,000 times every hour, or 10 times in between each second. So it has a smoother, more fluid sweep, noticeably more so than a watch that's 4 hertz or 28,800 beats per hour. And even more noticeable than a 3 hertz beat frequency. And so it's not quite, spring drive smooth, but it is very fluid, very sophisticated. And I love a good high beat. And Grand Seiko is one of those few manufacturers today, modern luxury manufacturers, that are doing in-house high beat movements. Zenith is another one that comes to mind, and I love to see it. So this thing, when it debuted, again in 2018, it has since sold out those 1,500 units. When it debuted, the retail price was $6,300. And I remember my friend Chris, who this watch belongs to. Chris is a good friend of mine here in Utah. He went with me when I bought my VC down in Las Vegas last year. In fact, him and the guy that sold me the VC, they've started a YouTube channel. And so I'll link their channel in the description if you guys would like to check out AboutTime. But anyways, Chris, I remember him texting me and saying, hey, I have an opportunity to buy this SBGH267. This was, I think, a year and a half ago now, about that length of time. And I think I even told him something to the effect of, yeah, that's a beautiful watch. Since it's limited, I'm sure you won't lose your shirt on it. And so if you like it, yeah, go ahead, pull the trigger. Well, in my mind thinking, maybe that's not the best purchase, because I flip all the time. So I'm always thinking about the value. I know a lot of you just don't do that. You're not flippers. In fact, maybe you're turned off by the value retention aspect of watches and horology. I totally get that to a degree. But anyways, I think I told Chris, yeah, that's beautiful. That's nice. I don't think it's a bad purchase. And I'm so glad that he ended up pulling the trigger. And obviously, he's been wearing this watch and loving this watch. It is kind of beat up. So kudos to Chris for wearing and using his watches and not letting them be safe queens, sitting in a safe, actually making memories with them and using them and enjoying them. You guys can see hairline wear marks throughout the bracelet, throughout the case, even a little tiny flea bite in the Sriracha polished bezel. So I love to see that. Obviously, Chris has been enjoying this and wearing it. But let's talk about the value retention for this specific model because I think it's fascinating. This is an interesting example. So remember, guys, this thing, when it was available, $6,300 full retail. I went to On Watch Recon to see, hey, what are they going for nowadays? Because I know they've gone up in value. There was none for sale. I went to eBay. There was only one completed listing. There were no current listings, and this is the completed listing here. It sold January 10th for $7,775 pre-owned from Japan. That's pretty cool. I went on Chrono24. There's only one listing in the world. It's in the US from a professional dealer, $14,500. I think that is foolishly optimistic, but that's kind of Chrono24. You'll get some really high prices. I don't think are really indicative of the going rate, but you know what, that might be a different story. Let me show you a new slide here. This is a website that I found recently called Watch Charts, and you can track the going rate of a certain watch. And so this one, you guys can see the market average is about $8,000 on what they sell for. And over the past year, there were 96 listings. Out of the 96 listings, 66 of them were sold. So about 70% of the listings ended up selling. And here's a chart showing the sold and unsold listings. I think this is really fascinating. So what we have on the left is, of course, the price from low to high. Down on the bottom, the scale is in time. So when the watch was released in 2018 to almost now. I mean, the last reference is September. But anyways, you guys can see every dot in red is a sold listing. Every dot in blue did not sell. And so, I mean, somebody got a crazy deal in February, early this year. They bought an example for under $4,000. That is wild. That someone got a steal of a deal right there. But you guys can see the gradual increase in the curve here. So it's just been going up and going up and going up. And some of these examples sold for over $8,000, over $9,000. One of them sold for over $10,000. That is wild. So you know what? Every time you hear some snob like Bruce Williams say, don't buy that Grand Seiko, you're going to lose your shirt. I'm just looking out for you. That's a terrible purchase. You're not going to love it. You're going to flip it. You're going to lose a lot of money. Don't do it. You know what? Next time you hear something like that, you can tell that individual to go jump in a lake. You know what? Not every Grand Seiko is going to appreciate. Like I mentioned, I've lost money. My father's lost money on Grand Seiko. My friends have lost money on Grand Seiko. But Chris, my other friend, obviously, if he wanted to sell this, I doubt it. He's not going to get $14,000. He's not going to get $10,000, I don't think. But he would get certainly more than what he paid for this, a year and a half ago. And I just think that's awesome. You know, there are some brands that generally don't do so well when it comes to value retention. Some brands do decent. There are some Grand Seikos that do all right. There's always seemingly a market for them. I'm looking at the Snowflake. I'm looking at some of those icons. They do pretty well. Some of the more obscure ones, not so much. Some of the ultra limited editions, they just don't come to the market again. And some of them, like this Grand Seiko SBGH267, show that a fairly significant amount, this 1,500 unit run that was already a decent price, right? $6,300 at retail. This goes to show that this is desirable. And I think this is fascinating. I love seeing it on a watch that's not a Rolex because, right, Rolex is the brand that you buy when you want to make a little bit of money on your watch. Grand Seiko isn't. So when this happens, I think this is fascinating. I think this is fun. So I know we've talked mostly about price. Let me talk about the actual watch here a little bit as we wrap up the video because it is a stunner. It's a looker. It is sophisticated with that high beat movement, 55 hours of power reserve. Look at the rotor. It's really unique. Most of this circular skeletonized rotor here is fashioned out of titanium that has some really interesting anodization. And then there is some tungsten that's attached or fixed to the circumference of part of the rotor to add some weight to get this to oscillate and spin freely. This is regulated to a window of +5 to -3 seconds per day, so just a little bit tighter than COSC levels of accuracy. And again, let's look at this anodized tungsten and titanium rotor and look at the color play. It's really interesting because if we look at the flip side of the watch, we get some nice juxtaposition here with this engraved, textured dial that is, frankly, to me, this is the star of the show. It has a muted gray blue look to it. So it's not bright and vivid and vibrant, but when you get it in the right light and you really see the exquisite detail down to the minute level, that's impressive. But then you also get some color play. You get a little bit of cyan, you get a little bit of violet to a degree, and especially in natural light. I mean, it just looks so dang good. And I got a few money shots with my DSLR here. I'm going to drop in a few of them where you guys can see just the lens flares coming off of these high polished faceted markers, the Dauphine style hands that are just sharp as can be. This thing is a looker. You pair that with the Suratsu polishing. You pair that with these rather sculpted lugs that are really unlike any other Grand Seiko well-known case design, if that makes sense. And you just have a recipe for success here. So we're looking at the size. It's a little bit under 40 millimeters in diameter, very wearable. And I will not show you a wrist roll here because Chris, he's just got smaller wrists than me, and I didn't get the extra link, so I haven't sized this to my wrist. It just looks a little bit too tight on me. But anyways, it's very proportional. And we have 19 millimeter lugs tapering down to 18 millimeters at the clasp, 13.1 in overall height, which is the big knock on Grand Seiko is outside of outside of the silly value retention thing that we talked about earlier. They're very tall for a dressy sport piece. Now I say kind of a sport piece because we have a screw down crown, 100 meters of water resistance. This to me, is very capable, just like a Datejust is from Rolex. So it's not technically a dress watch. I think it's more dress styled, but it's a good daily wear piece that's beautiful. And obviously Chris has worn this a heck of a lot over the past year and a half. And again, I love to see that. Now, lastly, as we close, let me share with you just some really interesting history that's specific to this 267. So let's look at the dial. Again, the star of the show, we can see a G, we can see an S, and we can see this interesting lightning form repeated here throughout the dial, getting smaller and smaller and smaller till you get to the center where the hand stack comes out, and you see that pop of gilt tone on the running seconds hand. You see that on the logo, the applied GS, so very, very sharp. But anyways, what is that logo? Now, forgive me when it comes to pronunciation because I'm just a heathen, I'll admit it. But the pronunciation, this is the icon or the logo for the Daini Seikosha entity. There were two different entities within Seiko that were really in competition with each other at the same time, which is really interesting when you think of it. There was the Daini and the Suwa. Most people know Suwa. We know that little spiral eye or hurricane. We know that logo. That's the Suwa logo. Suwa brought us Grand Seiko. We're very familiar with Suwa, but the lesser known one is the Daini Seikosha logo. So back in 1959, there were two different entities that were placed basically in competition with each other to spur innovation and growth and just improvement in a brand. So I think that's really interesting. I'm not familiar with any other brand that currently does that right now. But the Daini brought us the King Seiko, and it's just a little bit lesser known of an entity and a really cool icon. So I love to see that mixed in with the G and the S repeated here in this Grand Seiko. So ideally, this should have been named a King Seiko, right? But you know what? I still like to see Grand Seiko mixed with the Daini Seikosha entity logo. I think that's some fun bit of history. So I look at this watch, I see I just see a lovely dial, lovely details, great size, Suratsu polishing, a sophisticated movement, limited edition. I see the recipe for success, and I love the fact that it really has grown in popularity and appreciated in monetary value, even though it's not intrinsic. There's no precious metal associated with this watch. It's all about the desirability. And I think that's fascinating. So guys, thank you so much for watching today. Let me know what you think of value retention, specifically when it comes to Grand Seiko. Have you lost money on Grand Seiko? Have you made money on a Grand Seiko flip? And just tell me some of your experience there. Thank you so much to Chris for lending this in. I had a great time filming this gorgeous watch. I hope the quality came across here in the video. So Chris, I appreciate that. Thanks again, guys, and see you next time.